Welcome. Today we're exploring inside the tomb of Tutankhamun. It's really got to be one of the most incredible archaeological finds of the 20th century.
Oh, absolutely. A unique discovery, really. It gave us such an amazing window into that ancient world.
So we're focusing on the Valley of the Kings, near Luxor in modern Egypt.
Mhm.
This whole area was the main burial ground for New Kingdom pharaohs, right? So we're talking roughly 1539 to 1075 BC.
That's right. And there are over 60 tombs packed in there, though, only a few are actually open for people to visit.
It really speaks to the importance of this place for them.
The scale alone tells you something about their power and their beliefs about death and the afterlife.
And our main guy today is Tutankhamun, 18th dynasty. His reign was pretty short, wasn't it? Maybe 1332 to 1323 BC.
Yeah, very short. He became pharaoh when he was just a kid, maybe 9 years old, and ruled for about 10 years.
A boy king.
A boy king, yeah. And what's fascinating is that for a long time, he was almost completely forgotten, sort of written out of Egyptian history.
Which makes the discovery itself even more dramatic. November 4th, 1922. Howard Carter, with Lord Carnarvon funding him, finds the entrance.
Imagine that moment. After years of searching, and this tomb had been sealed, hidden away, for what, 3,300 years?
Unbelievable. And the key thing, as you said, was that it was mostly intact, unlike so many others in the valley.
Exactly. That's why it's such a big deal. Most royal tombs were heavily robbed centuries ago. Finding one like this, well, it was unprecedented.
Yeah, it gave us this almost complete picture of a royal burial.
Yeah.
And the reaction at the time, I mean, it was huge, right?
Oh, a media frenzy, the sheer number of items, the gold, the craftsmanship, it just stunned everyone. Carter's wonderful things.
The famous lines.
It instantly became the most famous discovery in all of Egyptology, and probably still is.
So that's what we want to do today. Really get inside the tomb, look at the history, the highlights, the really cool facts for you, exploring minds out there.
Sounds good. Where should we start? The history around him.
Yeah, let's start there. You mentioned he was almost erased from history. Why was that?
Well, it ties back to his father, Akhenaten, and that whole religious upheaval with Nefertiti. Akhenaten tried to change Egyptian religion drastically, focusing on one god, the Aten.
The Amarna period.
Exactly. It was controversial, and after Akhenaten died and Tutankhamun eventually took over, there was a push to restore the old gods and basically pretend the Amarna period never happened. Tutankhamun's successors removed his name, his father's name.
So finding his tomb wasn't just finding treasure, it was rediscovering a piece of deliberately hidden history.
Precisely. It shed light on that whole turbulent time. And the tomb itself, it's a bit unusual too, isn't it?
Right. It's not this massive, grand structure you might picture for a pharaoh.
No, it's quite small comparatively, and the decorations are simpler than other royal tombs from the New Kingdom.
So what's the thinking behind that?
Well, the leading idea is that it probably wasn't originally meant for Tutankhamun. It might have been intended for someone else, a high official, maybe even his advisor, who became pharaoh right after him.
Ah, so when Tutankhamun died unexpectedly young.
Exactly. They might have had to adapt this existing smaller tomb quickly. Then got buried in a different tomb later, WV-23.
Interesting. And its location within the valley.
It's in the eastern branch, cut right into the limestone bedrock, but down on the valley floor. Not high up on the cliffs like some others.
And that helped protect it.
Very likely, yeah. Its low position probably meant it got covered by flood debris or workers' huts from later tomb construction, hiding it from the main waves of tomb robbers. Pure luck, in a way.
Amazing. Okay, can you describe the layout for us if you were walking in?
Sure. So you go down this entrance staircase, originally 16 steps. Apparently some were messed with during the burial or excavations.
Okay.
That leads into a descending corridor. Then you hit the antechamber, the first main room Carter saw.
Filled with all those wonderful things.
Right. Off the antechamber, there's a smaller room called the annex. But the main path continues north from the antechamber into the burial chamber itself.
And that orientation is unusual too, isn't it? The axis.
Yeah, it gives the tomb a right bent axis. Most tombs of that era had a left bent axis. Another clue, maybe, that it was adapted or built under unusual circumstances.
And beyond the burial chamber.
There's one more room off the burial chamber called the treasury.
Got it. Staircase, corridor, antechamber, annex, burial chamber, treasury, and size-wise, roughly.
Well, the antechamber was maybe about 8 by 3.5 meters. The burial chamber, a bit smaller in width, maybe 4 by 6.5 meters, so not huge spaces.
Supports that repurposed tomb idea. What about decoration? We think of Egyptian tombs covered in art.
Here it's surprisingly limited. Only the burial chamber has painted walls directly onto plaster over the limestone with a distinctive yellow background.
Just painted. No carvings.
No relief carvings, which is interesting because that became pretty standard later on. Again, maybe a sign of haste or the tomb's original non-royal status.
Possibly. And you mentioned seals before.
Yeah.
On the doorways.
Yes, when Carter broke through, he found doorways sealed with plaster, stamped with official seals, some from the original burial, others from a restoration effort after robbers broke in relatively soon after Tutankhamun was buried.
Robbers got in even then.
Yes, evidence suggests at least 2 robberies happened quite early on. The seals show officials resealed the tomb, celebrating Tutankhamun's relationship with the gods.
Okay, so a hidden history, adapted layout, lucky location, simple decorations. But the contents, that's the main story. The sheer number of objects.
Staggering. 5,398 items cataloged. It's really the only nearly complete set of royal burial goods we have from the valley. Think hundreds of shaptis, those little servant figures.
To do the work for him in the afterlife.
Exactly. And hundreds of pieces of jewelry, furniture, weapons, chariots, everything a king could possibly need.
Let's start in that antechamber. Carter, looking through that small hole, what did he see?
Chaos, but magnificent chaos. Furniture piled high, dismantled chariots, offerings of food and flowers, statues. It was crammed.
And those 2 big statues guarding the burial chamber entrance.
Yes, 2 life-size statues of Tutankhamun, coated in black resin with gilded details. They likely represent his Ka, his life force or spirit double. Very imposing.
What else stood out in there? Any particularly famous pieces?
Oh, definitely. There were 3 large funerary beds or couches with animal heads, lions, cows, also a beautiful calcite, alabaster, lotus-shaped chalice. Sometimes called that, yeah. And a painted wooden box showing Tutankhamun riding a chariot, leading battles against Nubians and Syrians. Very dynamic scenes. But perhaps the most famous piece from the antechamber is that gilded throne. It shows Tutankhamun relaxing with his queen and Kesenemun anointing him. It's incredibly detailed and intimate.
Yeah, I've seen pictures. It's stunning. Gives you a real human connection.
It really does. And beyond the big items, there was just stuff. Boxes of clothing, sandals, cosmetic jars, games. Even a sort of mannequin, a wooden head and torso, maybe for fitting clothes or wigs.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move into the heart of it, the burial chamber. What dominates that space?
The nested shrines. It's like a set of Russian dolls, but huge. There's an outermost shrine of gilded wood. Inside that, a wooden frame draped with a pall, a linen cloth covered in golden rosettes.
Okay.
Then 3 more shrines, fitting one inside the other, also gilded wood, covered in intricate carvings and texts, all surrounding the sarcophagus.
Protecting the king's body. What about those magic bricks you mentioned?
Ah, yes. Set into niches in each of the 4 walls were mud bricks inscribed with spells from the Book of the Dead, kind of like magical guardians for the chamber.
And the shrines themselves, they're covered in texts, too.
Yes, religious texts meant to help the king navigate the afterlife. Extracts from the Book of the Dead, the Amduet, which describes the sun god's journey through the underworld.
And the Book of the Heavenly Cow.
On the outermost shrine, yeah. And interestingly, the second shrine had this very unusual text written in coded or enigmatic hieroglyphs. Scholars are still debating its exact meaning.
Layers of ritual. And finally, at the center of it all, the sarcophagus.
A massive stone box made of quartzite, but the lid was red granite, painted yellow to match the base. Carved on the corners were figures of the 4 protective goddesses, Isis, Nephthys, Neith, and Serket with their wings outstretched.
Beautiful imagery. And inside?
Inside the sarcophagus was a bier, like a low bed shaped like a lion. And resting on that were 3 coffins, nested one inside the other, all in human shape.
3 coffins.
Yes. The outer 2 were made of gilded wood inlaid with glass and semi-precious stones. But the innermost one.
That's the famous one, isn't it?
That's the one. Solid gold. Weighing over 110 kilograms, about 243 pounds. An incredible piece of craftsmanship.
It's just staggering. And inside that solid gold coffin
lay the mummy of Tutankhamun himself. And he wasn't empty-handed. He was adorned with 143 separate items placed directly on the mummy wrappings.
143 items, like what?
Oh, everything. Gold sandals, rings, bracelets, collars, amulets, and tucked into the wrappings were 2 daggers.
The daggers, yes. One gold, but the other.
The other had an iron blade. An analysis showed it was made from meteoritic iron from outer space.
That's incredible. Iron was still very rare then, wasn't it?
Extremely rare and valuable, perhaps more so than gold. Using meteorite iron shows incredible skill and perhaps a connection to the heavens.
Wow. What else was on the mummy?
He wore a beaded skull cap, a beautiful gold diadem with vulture and cobra symbols of royalty, and then, covering his head and shoulders,
The mask.
the golden death mask, probably the single most famous object from ancient Egypt, 21 inches long, 22 pounds of gold, inlaid with lapis lazuli, quartz, obsidian. It's breathtaking.
Truly iconic. And it had a spell on the back.
Yes, a protective spell from the Book of the Dead, chapter 151b, meant to ensure the mask served as the king's face in the afterlife.
That's amazing. Okay, one more room. The treasury. What treasures were kept in there?
Right at the entrance stood this fantastic shrine dedicated to Anubis, the jackal god of mummification. It was a life-size wooden statue of Anubis as a jackal, covered in black resin, placed on a portable gilded sledge or shrine. And in front of it was the fifth magic brick. Inside the treasury proper, the main thing was this large gilded shrine that contained the canopic chest.
For the organs.
Exactly. The chest itself was carved from a single block of calcite or alabaster. Inside were 4 compartments, each holding a miniature inlaid gold coffinet, and inside those were the king's preserved internal organs: liver, lungs, stomach, intestines.
Wow. Even the organs got their own solid gold coffins.
Miniature ones, yes, but incredibly detailed. Each lid was shaped like Tutankhamun's head.
What else was significant in the treasury?
There was a beautiful gilded wooden head of a cow representing the goddess Hathor, lots of wooden boxes containing jewelry, and many model boats for the king's journey in the afterlife, model granaries,
Practical items for the next world.
and some very personal items, too.
Right, you mentioned those earlier.
Yes, a small set of nested coffins held a lock of hair identified as belonging to Queen Tai, his grandmother, a real connection to his family.
That's quite touching.
And perhaps even more so, 2 tiny coffins, miniatures, containing the mummified fetuses of 2 baby girls, likely Tutankhamun and Ankhesemen's stillborn daughters.
Oh, wow. A very human tragedy preserved there.
It really brings home the personal side of the story. So, beyond all this amazing stuff, what did the discovery really tell us?
Well, that's the interesting part. While it didn't reveal a huge amount of new historical text about his reign or the Amarna period,
Right, not many scrolls or papyri.
it gave us this unbelievable snapshot of the material culture of the Egyptian elite. What they owned, what they valued, what they thought they needed for eternity.
Like that foldable bed you mentioned.
Exactly. Apparently, it's the only complete one known from ancient Egypt. Folds up for travel, maybe? And Carter thought some of the wooden boxes with clever lashing mechanisms were the oldest examples ever found.
Simple things, but they tell a story.
And the everyday items, too, those trumpets, the weapons, all those walking sticks or staffs. One apparently had a note saying Tutankhamun cut it himself.
Little glimpses of the person.
Yeah. And some objects did hint at the bigger picture, the end of that Amarna period.
Right, like finding box fragments still bearing Akhenaten's name, or evidence that some of the burial equipment, like maybe parts of the coffins, might have been originally made for his immediate predecessors, like Smenkhkare or Neferneferuiten, and then adapted for Tutankhamun.
More signs of that rushed, complex transition period.
Definitely. And the robberies. The fact that the tomb was robbed, but only partially, and then resealed.
That must have been fascinating for archaeologists studying tomb security.
Hugely important. It became a primary source for understanding how tombs were robbed in the New Kingdom, what thieves targeted mostly oils, perfumes, metals, linens, things easy to carry and resell, and how officials tried to repair the damage and restore order. Those dockets on the boxes listing contents were key.
Even the mummy itself, though damaged, yielded info.
Yes, sadly it was in poor condition, partly because of the sheer amount of resins and unguents poured over it during mummification, which caused chemical reactions.
And Carter's team had to dismember it to examine it and remove the jewelry.
They did, which was controversial later, but necessary with the techniques of the time. But the examination confirmed he died young, around 18 or 19 years old. The exact cause of death is still debated, though.
Malaria, bone disease, chariot accident, lots of theories.
Lots of theories, yes. And where are all these wonderful things now? Can people see them?
Most of them, yes. The vast majority of the 5,398 objects are now housed in the Grand Egyptian Museum, the GMAM, in Giza, near Cairo.
A fantastic new home for them.
Yeah. But the mummy itself and the outer coffins and the stone sarcophagus, they remain where Carter found them, inside the tomb in the Valley of the Kings.
Still in his final resting place.
Right. And because the original tomb is quite small and fragile, they've actually built a very high-quality replica nearby, including the burial chamber, to help manage tourist numbers and preserve the original.
That's a smart approach. Is the original tomb still popular?
Oh, incredibly.
Oh.
Even though it's small, it's Tutankhamun. On busy days, apparently up to 1,000 people might visit. You need your main Valley of the Kings ticket, then a separate extra ticket just for Tutankhamun's tomb, and usually a tram ticket to get up the valley to it.
Worth the effort, I imagine.
Absolutely. So wrapping this up, it's just hard to overstate the impact of finding Tutankhamun's tomb. It really is this unique window into the world of the pharaohs.
Into their lives, their deaths, their incredibly complex beliefs about eternity.
Yeah, all those wonderful things, from the mask everyone knows to the little things, the sandals, the lock of hair. They just paint this incredibly vivid picture of this young king.
Connects us across more than 3,000 years.
It really does. And maybe a final thought for you listening. Just think about the immense skill, the resources, the sheer artistry that went into making literally thousands of objects for one young man who was only king for about a decade.
What does that dedication tell us about ancient Egyptian civilization? Their power, their beliefs, their view of kingship?
Exactly. It's something to ponder. Maybe seek out some pictures of the artifacts online or learn about the ongoing research. It's a story that keeps unfolding.